quiet street erupted in chaos when flashing lights and shouting officers cornered a man walking his loyal German Shepherd. Neighbors watched in horror as commands turned into confusion, and in one devastating instant, gunfire ended the dog's life. The man fell to his knees, clutching the only family he had left. But the officers didn't realize who they had provoked. This wasn't just any grieving owner. This was a retired Delta Force commander, one of the most lethal soldiers alive. And their actions had awakened something they could never contain. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The small suburban neighborhood knew him as just another quiet man. He lived in a modest house at the end of the street, kept his yard neat, and rarely drew attention. Most mornings, neighbors would spot him jogging with his German Shepherd, a striking animal with alert eyes and a calm but commanding presence. To them, the man was simply a loner with his dog as his only real companion. Few ever wondered about his past, and he gave no reason for them to ask. The dog wasn't just a pet, it was family. Their bond ran deeper than most could understand. The shepherd had been trained with a precision that surprised anyone who witnessed it. A single hand signal, a single whistle, and the dog would respond with flawless obedience. Children admired the animal from afar. Parents marveled at its discipline. No one realized that such training was born not from backyard routines, but from years of hardened experience in places far darker than this peaceful town. He had built a life of quiet routine, walking his dog through the same tree-lined streets, keeping his head down. But beneath the surface lay a man forged by war, carrying secrets he never planned to reveal. It started as just another ordinary morning. The sun was climbing slowly, spilling golden light over the rooftops, and the man stepped outside with his German Shepherd trotting faithfully beside him. The air carried the faint smell of cut grass, the kind of peaceful detail most people took for granted. To him, this morning felt no different. Another walk, another chance to enjoy the silence of his small neighborhood. He had no idea that within minutes the world he had carefully built was about to collapse. Halfway down the block, a police cruiser rolled into view. Its engine hummed low and its windows reflected the bright sky. The dog's ears perked up as if sensing something wasn't right. The man slowed his stride, his instincts from years in Delta Force whispering caution, even though his life now was supposed to be free of conflict. The officers stepped out, tense, their hands hovering close to their weapons. They barked orders, their voices sharp, commanding. The man raised a hand in confusion, trying to explain, but his words were drowned out by the escalating shouts. His dog, loyal and protective, stood by his side, calm yet alert. In that moment, tension filled the air like static before a storm. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains, their peaceful morning shattered by the unfolding confrontation. What began as routine was rapidly spiraling into tragedy. One decision away from tearing apart the fragile calm the man had fought so hard to preserve. The tension broke in an instant. One officer shouted louder, his voice echoing off the houses. The German Shepherd, sensing the hostility, stepped slightly forward, ears sharp, body protective. He wasn't aggressive, just loyal, standing between his master and the threat. But to the officers, trained to act on fear and split-second judgment, that slight move was enough. A deafening crack split the air. Then another. The man's world froze as his dog yelped and collapsed at his feet. For a moment, silence swept over the street, heavy and unbearable. The man dropped to his knees, cradling the animal's body, his own voice breaking into a raw cry that cut deeper than any bullet could. Neighbors gasped, horrified, pressing hands to their mouths. The officers stood rigid, guns still raised, faces betraying both shock and stubborn resolve. They had just killed a dog, but not just any dog. They had killed the only companion who had carried the man through sleepless nights, memories of battlefields, and scars that no one else could see. The man's hands shook as he pressed against the dog's fur, desperate for a heartbeat that was already fading. Rage surged through him, mixing with grief as the faces of the officers blurred into the same enemy he had faced overseas. They didn't know it yet, but with every second that passed, they had awakened a storm. The man's tears fell on the lifeless body, and in that moment something inside him shattered. The officers barked commands, their voices trembling as they demanded the man put his hands in the air. But he didn't move. He knelt in silence, eyes locked on the dog's still body, shoulders rising and falling with steady, controlled breaths. It wasn't the panic of a guilty man, it was the calm of someone who had stood in darker storms than this. One officer, sensing danger, reached for the man's arm. In a flash, the veteran's hand shot up, locking the officer's wrist with surgical precision. The man didn't throw a punch. He didn't lash out wildly. Instead, he disarmed the officer in a single fluid motion, dropping the gun to the pavement. The other officers froze, stunned by the speed, their training paling in comparison to his mastery. Neighbors who had gathered whispered to one another, their voices carrying fragments of recognition. "That's him," one older veteran muttered under his breath. "I've seen him before. He's not just a soldier. He's Delta." The officers exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of realization creeping into their faces. They weren't dealing with an ordinary man. They had just crossed the wrong line with one of the most lethal warriors ever trained by the U.S. military, someone who had led missions classified so deeply that even generals spoke his name in hushed tones. The man rose slowly, grief hardening into something unshakable. His dog's sacrifice had lit a fire inside him, and now everyone could feel it, the calm before the storm. The street was silent, the only sound the faint hum of police radios. The man stood tall now, his hands loose at his sides, his grief buried beneath a chilling composure. His eyes, once clouded with sorrow, had sharpened into something else, an intensity that made even the most hardened officers shift uncomfortably in their boots. "Step back," one officer barked, trying to reassert control. But his voice wavered, betraying his fear. The man's lips barely moved as he spoke, his tone calm yet razor-sharp. "You've taken from me the only thing I had left. Don't push me any further." His words weren't shouted, but they carried more weight than any threat the officers had ever heard. One rookie officer scoffed, raising his weapon. Before he could blink, the man stepped forward, pivoting with lightning speed. In one smooth motion, he twisted the rookie's arm, stripping the gun away and ejecting the magazine before tossing the weapon at the officer's feet. The entire exchange lasted seconds, leaving the squad frozen, unable to comprehend how easily their training had been dismantled. The man didn't gloat. He didn't boast. He simply stared at them, his silence more terrifying than any display of force. The officers finally understood. They weren't facing an ordinary civilian. They had awakened a commander trained to outthink, outfight, and outlast the deadliest enemies in the world. And he was just getting started. Just as the standoff reached its breaking point, the growl of engines echoed down the street. Black SUVs pulled up, their tinted windows reflecting the flashing police lights. Doors swung open and men in suits stepped out, moving with quiet authority. They weren't local cops. They weren't FBI. They were higher, federal, military, and they knew exactly who they had come for. The lead agent strode forward, his eyes fixed on the veteran. "Stand down," he ordered, not to the commander but to the police. Confused, the officers hesitated, weapons still raised. The agent's voice cut sharper. "Do you have any idea who this man is?" "Lower your weapons now." Reluctantly, the squad obeyed, lowering their rifles. Fear etched across their faces. The man remained motionless, his gaze unblinking, grief and fury still burning inside him. The agent softened his tone, almost reverent. "Commander, we'll handle this. You've done enough for this country. Let us clean their mess." For the first time, the officers understood. They hadn't killed just any man's dog. They had crossed a line with a legend, someone the military still spoke about in whispers. Slowly, the commander turned, giving one last look at his fallen companion. His voice was quiet, but it carried across the street. "He was more than a dog. He was my family, and there will be justice." With that, he walked away, the silence he left behind heavier than any battle cry.